Joining us now is Representative Mark Green, the congressman serving the 7th District of Tennessee. So, Congressman, this week we actually saw your state start to open up. A lot of your governors said that they can start in limited type of capacities. Certain counties start opening up the economy once again. How has that gone so far?
It's actually going very well. I mean, there are, of course, folks that would like to see it go faster, and there are folks who'd like to see it go slower. But I think so far, the businesses that have opened up have been very happy to do so.
Yeah, and that's something that we hear from a lot of people. There's a little bit of a growing support for reopening the economy. Of course, there is still a big part of the country that is a little bit hesitant to do so too quickly. So that's kind of the balance weight that a lot of these governors have to face right now. But I think it's also important to recognize the fact that your home state of Tennessee, for example, is different than the state of New York. Can you explain how that plays into the decision-making process?
Sure, absolutely. If you look at where we are on our curve, so to speak, we've had significant sort of stabilization of our cases. We only have 180 something fatalities in the whole state during this COVID crisis, which is very fortunate. I mean, we're very fortunate in that regard. And the other thing to look at too is our ventilator capacity. We have probably only about 30% of our ventilators used. And originally they thought we'd have 7,000, a need for 7,000 extra beds. And we only wound up needing 800 and something beds. Compare that to New York, where there were basically hospitals set up in Central Park. And interestingly enough, Fort Campbell, which is my district right here in Tennessee, deployed its hospital, its field hospital, to New York to help those guys out. So totally different, and we should be opening up.
And that's due in part to a lot of the efforts of the people of Tennessee, for example. They were asked to go under those strict lockdown orders. They did so very effectively. And because they did so, now they're early to get back to work. I think that's something that a lot of people across the country are trying to replicate. So credit to the people of Tennessee for that. But I think it also brings up an interesting debate when it comes to the idea of either states declaring bankruptcy or being bailed out by the federal government. We've heard Governor Andrew Cuomo kind of go head to head with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell over this issue. Where do you stand when it comes to that?
Yeah, so I don't think it's fair for, states that manage themselves well, like Tennessee. We have the lowest per capita debt in the nation. Our pension plan is fully funded. And what we don't want to see is our tax dollars bailing out the bad decisions before COVID and even some during COVID. In the case of New York, in the midst of the COVID, they gave their, all their state employees a big pay raise. So that we don't need Tennesseans paying for bad decisions of other states. It's just not fair. It's not right. It's not what the founders intended when they created the federalist system.
And when it comes to the federal government, it's for our viewers something a little bit separate than the decisions being made in the state. You've actually proposed a bill that would ask China to be held accountable for its actions in really slow walking this entire pandemic, not being truthful about the early stages of it. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Absolutely. People should really go and look at some of the history of what China's been doing over the past 10 to 20 years, really since Tiananmen Square. But today, with COVID, they very clearly have misled people. And it's really shed a light on our supply chain, both for medications and PPE, but also as the economic crisis has suppressed asset values, China's going around gobbling up companies that actually impact our national security, companies that have technologies that our military needs. And so what I've done with this newest bill is create an investment guarantee to American investors who go and buy these cash-strapped companies instead of letting them be gobbled up by China. And that basically allows those companies to remain in the control of American investors and Americans. So it keeps China from getting a monopoly on the technology that would, really harm our national security.
And of course, China has been accused of IP theft in the past. Their use of Huawei products in particular pose national security concerns for not only the United States, but also its spread across Europe. There's many things that China needs to be held accountable from a lot of people's perspectives, and that includes trade deficits as well. So when it comes to these things, what type of teeth should the U.S. have? I mean, is this something that we should go at from a more global type of response, acknowledging the fact that it has been an effect on the global community, not just the United States?
Yeah, there's lots of things that we can do, and it's not so much the trade imbalance as it is where the manufacturing of critical stuff is, and we want that stuff back in the United States. So one bill we're writing and plan to file as soon as it gets back to us and approved, the language is to expense a move for a company back from China to the United States, do their manufacturing in the U.S., will expense the cost of that move up to 100% on their tax returns and pay for it with the tariff dollars that are out there. I'm not a big fan of tariffs, but while they're there, we can use that surplus, that money, to actually expense companies to return to the United States. Other ideas are to let states in the U.S. sue China, which two have already done so, Missouri and Mississippi. But I think other states and communities are going to follow suit. Things like that, though, that can help China realize they're responsible for tens of thousands of deaths across the world, and they have to pay for that. They're responsible.
Yeah, that might be the silver lining, if there is one, in this horrible situation, is acknowledging the different things that China has done in the past and is currently doing. The medical supply chain is one that I think kind of goes hand in hand with what you're talking about right now. Because a lot of the medical supplies were made overseas, it put the United States in a bad position, and I think that's something that we're going to prevent moving forward. But Representative
Yes.
Mark Green, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.